Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Welcome once again to another Tuesday. My name is David Etienne of Etienne Business Solutions, and we are once again at Etienne's place where we have our regular Tuesday evening webcast. So welcome. My name is David Etienne. I am owner, CEO of Etienne Business Solutions. We're a certified public accounting firm, so to speak, or public accounting firm. And we have our YouTube channel, Etienne's Place. And basically, this webcast and all others that were and that is to come is basically on this platform, while we're also streaming on Facebook, etc. And as usual, I invite you, always have to do that, invite you to check out our YouTube channel, Etienne's Place, where we have a list of all of our videos, webcasts, you name it, of various topics on a wide range of subject matters, all in the business arena, but on taxation, business development, accounting, financial planning, etc. So check it out, and I invite you to subscribe, like, comment, and be informed. My favorite term: be informed, be empowered. So this evening we want to look at one. As a matter of fact, today we're wrapping up. Today we're going to be wrapping up our cost management series. Let me refer to it as that, because so far for the past 3 or 4 Tuesday webcasts, we have been looking at managing costs. Okay. Today we want to look at another cost concept, and I think this will bring our cost series to a close. Today we look at activity-based costing. That's what we're looking at today. Activity-based costing. Okay. Now, activity-based costing is relatively new when compared to things like what we looked at before: standard costing, marginal costing, process costing. So activity-based costing came about as businesses sought more efficient, more precise, more direct ways of really identifying and measuring or quantifying costs. So we are what we refer to as activity-based costing. And the name of the costing type tells us basically what it's all about: activity-based costing. You may have heard me mention on prior costing topics the concept of cost drivers. And essentially, a cost driver is something that drives costs. So you said, but yes, it's true. It's just something that drives your cost. So if I am undertaking a particular activity and I'm incurring costs as I go along to execute this activity, then quite often I'll be in a position to identify what actual action, what actual process, what actual event is creating these costs. What event is creating this cost, or what are the set of events that create these costs that I'm looking at. And these events, we look at them on the topic, under the concept of activity. So cost drivers is basically those identifiable actions that result in a cost being incurred, which is necessary for the production of an item. Cost drivers. Coming back to activity-based costing, as I said earlier on, that's a relatively new costing concept when you compare it to things like standard and process costing. And it came about when businesses saw that it would be more scientific and precise if they could identify and quantify costs strictly based on what action did I take that resulted in this cost. Let's take, for example, let us say that there is a forklift operator. Okay, so he's in a production setting, in a manufacturing setting, and he's a forklift operator. One way to ascertain costs to be applied to output would be to say, okay, the cost of operating a forklift for a day is, say, $100. And so I could do it in a couple of ways. I could say, okay, to find out the cost per unit, let me divide $100 of forklift operating cost by the number of units that I produce for the day, and that would give me cost per unit, but at the same time, it would give me forklift operating cost per unit. Because remember, any total cost that you divide by a number of units, you end up with a cost per unit. So if you're in the total cost of operating a forklift for a day, and you divide it by the number of units produced in that day, you end up with a cost, right? A cost per hour of forklift operation. Let's take another example. There are some things that are called general overheads. Why? And most of the time, when it comes to like administrative expenses. So, for example, you may have a manufacturing concern, yes, and it may have different departments. But the truth be told, there's an element of administration or administrative processes that still has to be applied to a manufacturing concern. Okay, so usually, although you try to ascribe costs specific to whatever you're producing, and you say, okay, this is the one that generated that cost, this cost, the other cost. There are some costs that are general to all processes, general to all departments, general to the overall operation of the entity, and we call those general overheads. And so one of the ways that people apply that type of cost, which is the overhead cost, to production is to just say, okay, our total administrative cost or total supervisory cost was $5,000 for the week. So let us divide that by total units produced for the week, and we get our administrative cost per unit, management cost per unit. That's a general way of approaching it. Activity-based costing is saying no. Let's go back to the forklift example. Say no. Look carefully to see where, for what, and what different stages of the process you actually utilize the service of a forklift. So, for example, if we had 3 departments, but whatever happens in department 1 is such that it is just, you move your materials, your supplies, whatever, on a conveyor belt because of the configuration of that department, then note, no forklift is used. The same may be applicable to Department B. No forklift is used. But maybe, because of the configuration, because of the logistics of things, moving from B to C, you need to use a forklift. Now, once the forklift starts its operation in the third phase, stage B, that is where you incur forklift costs. So instead of doing what we say is possible earlier on, by just taking the cost of forklift divided by the number of units produced to come up with a cost of forklift per unit, we say, no, let's be specific. Let us see what actual activity drove the cost, known as forklift cost. So it would suggest, therefore, that Department B, the third phase, is where the cost forklift is generated. And so instead of generalizing and applying the cost of forklift across the total spectrum, we say no. Forklift cost was driven by this particular activity that only occurred in Department C at the third phase or stage. And so let us ensure that we apply just to that one. So activity-based costing. Again, let's look at the general, what I call the general expenses that we normally just spread evenly over everybody. What if I decide that there's no point in having a quality control? I mean, quality is necessary at every point of the game. But let us say that we say, okay, there's no point having a quality control personnel at step 1, step 2, step 3. No, because step 1 is basically the start of the process where we're just putting raw material, getting everything together, starting the process, the rough work. Let us allow it to go through phase 1 or step 1, go to phase 2, step 2. At the end of step 2, this is where we want to, analyze and ascertain and ensure that our quality control is in place, that our standards are in place before we move to step 3. So it means, therefore, if I'm a quality control officer, then I'll be put exactly at that point in the process, which is at the end of step 2, to do my review, to do my evaluation, to do my assessment, which then will move the product to step 3. So if you notice, quality control is an activity. This is a quality control officer who comes into the line, into the pipeline, into the production process. But you insert him here at the end of the second phase to ensure that everything is up to standard before moving to step 3. Now, in that case, it means that I only started incurring quality control costs at that point. So the driver then of cost in this case is me having an activity known as quality control, but that activity only occurred at this point. It was a part of stage 1 or step 1 or Department A. Okay? And that, in a nutshell, is the concept of activity-based costing. Looking at specific activities that are what we call the drivers of cost. How did this cost come about? What activity, what action brought this cost to life? Okay, and therefore, having identified the activity, we can quantify the cost. So identifying cost, quantifying cost enables us to, well, it's two things, enable us to be able to attach those costs strictly to that step, that process, that department. And so we're able to, yes, look at our overall cost, but be in a better position to zero down and ascertain and ascribe cost specifically or more specifically to the departments and the process or the phase of the process that generate that cost by virtue of the fact that we identify the cost driver, what activity brought it into existence. And we could get into a lot of other detail, but that is a concept of activity-based costing. So we have looked at several costing types. And the question could then be asked, okay, so having exposed us to 3-4 different, and there are a number of others, having exposed us to these different cost types and how we determine the costs, etc. Where do we go from here? Should I be using an element of all of these cost types in my production process? Is there one that is better than the other? Should I just randomly select one that is convenient for me or easier to monitor and manage and apply and go with it? The answer is yes and no, but it all begins at the phase and stage of you identifying the nature of your production flow, the nature of your production process. And so you definitely see that different costing types or methods are more suitable, more applicable to the nature of what you're doing. There will always be evidence that any type of costing that you use will deliver for you some element of result. But like anything else, specific to your production process, and a good example is, for example, last week we spoke on process costing, if I read process. And as I was saying, okay, if I have product A, but it's going to distinct phases of production, then process costing may be a very, very good or the best methods to apply in trying to capture cost on a department by department basis, on a process by process basis. On the other hand, if, as I mentioned this evening, if I'm having a total cost that is made up of cost injections at different stages, which may not be applicable to stage 1, 2, or 3, but is applicable to stage 4, 5, and 6, then I would really want to be able to identify how these costs came about, what were the drivers, okay, what was the action, or what were the actions that brought about these costs. So a selection of costing method is important, very important, because the right costing method is really what is going to give you the truest picture, the truest results of what your costs are, how they are to be allocated, and how they are to be applied to different phases, stages, or departments in the process. Okay, that's how we look at it. Cool. So that is it for costing. I think I've touched on the I would say most important, but the most used costing methods that you'll find in the manufacturing concern. And I think that any of those that we discussed, any of those can be applied irrespective of the scale of operation, okay? Irrespective of the scale of operation. So I go back to what I spoke, that I like to repeat. Do not be daunted or be intimidated by these cost concepts, thinking that, oh boy, to apply these things, I need to have some fancy software and I need to, be operating at 1 million units per month, in order to start using it. No. The concepts are basic, the concepts are true, the concepts are useful, irrespective of the scale of operation. Irrespective of the scale. Because whatever you do to ensure that if your revenue and I know we're just talking about cover. Let's give an example, an analogy here. Whatever you do to ensure that from your $10 sales, you don't want your cost to be more than $8 so that you can make a $2. That's a sound business principle. So if your sales was 10 million, principle holds. You want to do everything in your power to ensure that your costs don't go above 800,000 so that you can make 200,000 profit, whatever the case is. So the principle and the concept is not depending on the scale of operation, meaning that each and every one in business, in manufacturing, small businesses, even the guy who have 2-3 persons coming together to manufacture something. A very good example that I like to cite from time to time is the production of guitars. You see my guitar there, one of my many guitars, my little friends. So the production of guitars, if you it's a simple process, and quite often, yes, one person will go through and do whatever because it's a small operation. Larger operations, you'll find where they take the raw wood and they start to the cutting out, etc. department, and they cut here, put together, sand down, pass around, put on the coating, the finishing, or the neck and the frets, what they call the fret in neck, the strings. So all those things will be part of the cost components of a finished guitar, right? And so, irrespective of the size of operation, you will find that to properly identify your costs using one of these methods is always going to be helpful. So as I started on the first occasion, this is how I'm wrapping up the costing series. There's a simple equation that runs businesses. You can get very technical, yes, if you want to get into the nitty-gritties, but at the basic level, there's a simple 3-variable equation. Revenue, expenses, results. Revenue, expenses, results. Well, I call it results because what we're going to end up as a third variable is going to depend on the first two. The revenue, the expense, work against each other to give me a result. So we're all familiar with it. My revenue is my income, and I have my expenses that I incurred. So when I take income minus expenses, I will be left with a result. That result will be a surplus if the revenue is greater than the expense, a deficit, a negative quantity, what we will call it, if my revenue is such that my expenses are greater, then I'm left with a negative position. And if by some stroke of magic or ingenuity, my revenue is the same figure as my cost, then I end up with no profit, no loss, or no surplus, no deficit, and I say I break even, loosely speaking. If that is the case, and I know that as a business person, I always want, and I'm always pushing for a positive end result, making a profit, not even about break even, because break even, let's remind you, is just the worst case scenario that I do not want to go beneath. Definitely not, because I will start making a loss. But I'm in the business to make a profit, so my aim is to have that third variable be a positive number. And we usually go for, how do I get that number to be positive? Or first knee-jerk reaction, and yes, that's what we do as business people, is question, how do I find a way to increase the first variable, which is my sales, my revenue, my income? What can I do to increase, to boost it up? Okay. The other thing to look at, which will impact the end result, is how can I manage my costs? Because I want to do whatever in my power to maximize my revenue, to as much as possible minimize my costs, and by so doing, I will maximize my profit. There are times when, based on economic circumstances, we're unable to push the revenue beyond a certain point because we have done all we can, all the marketing, all the promotion, all the, you name it, social media, and we have seen revenue growing by, say, 10%. It has reached a point where the economic realities dictate that it will go no further, at least for now, until conditions change. So we want to say, okay, since there's nothing more we can do on the revenue side to push it up, how can we then control the cost? At best, we would like to find a way of reducing the cost. But if that's not possible, at least we want to find a way of controlling the cost. Because in the face of revenue not going up anymore, we want to control the cost so we can influence the end result, which is the bottom line. Last thing I'll say on this, in times when it is possible to bump up the revenue, and so get better bottom line, better end results, we tend to overlook the importance of managing the costs. Yeah, and that's a simple budget concept or even human psychology. Because if I have a lot of money, I spend. I'm not coming home and say, oh boy, at the end of today's spending, let me check to see how much money I've left back to see what I'm gonna do tomorrow. No, because I have a lot of money. But if the money is restricted, that is when we start to get all the pen and paper and say, okay, today we went and we bought this and whatever. So we have that amount left and we're budgeting. Okay, so the same thing here. When there's a way to bump up revenue exponentially, business people, small business, we tend to be very slack and loose about managing the cost. It's usually when we're not able to push up the revenue anymore that we start to look and say, boy, how can I hold on the cost? We should be looking at both equally, with equal fervor, with equal focus. How do I bump up revenue, or do I manage costs so that I have positive and growing bottom line, positive results, positive net income, profit, and not just positive, but hopefully growing with time. Okay, cool. That's about it for this evening, and that wraps up the auditors. I did not start off thinking about it as a costing series, but as I went to the different cost concepts, I thought it would be helpful to just go through some of the more important, some of the heavier used costing method. So that's it for today. So just review all the different cost concepts that we have gone through for the past couple of weeks. See that which is applicable to you, and run with it. But in all you do, cost management is a critical piece. You see, you need to develop the discipline and the structure and system of managing costs is key, because that is something that you can easily get away from you, and people will tell you that once cost management is loose, that is when you're going to have a lot of leakages, wastes, and that only results into negative bottom line. Okay, David Etienne, my company is Etienne Business Solutions, certified public accountant, business consultants. This has been your Tuesday webcast, and again, check us out on our YouTube video, Etienne's Place. Subscribe, like, share, and just inform yourselves using those videos that we have online there. There are quite a bit and quite a wide variety of topics. Good. So next week we meet here again Tuesday for another video cast, Etienne's Place, and we will be switching our flow from costing methods to another pertinent business topic. So enjoy the rest of your week. Work hard. Believe me, just work hard. The results will flow. Okay, keep working hard. And in all that you do, try to be the best business person that you can be. But more importantly, try to be the best individual that you can be. Not just for yourself, but for others. So David's saying, guidance, God bless. catch you next Tuesday, same place at Etienne's place. Bye.